वेदर्षयः समारभ्य वेदान्ताचार्या मध्यमाः योगीरां सुरत्कुमारपर्यन्तं वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् रत्नाकराधौतपतां हिमालयकिरीटिनीं ब्रह्मराजर्षिरत्नाढ्यां वन्दे भारतमातरम्. Vedas and the Upanishads are the bedrock of Bharatavarsha's most ancient civilization, spiritual civilization. Vedas are always called Shruti because they were the revelations that were listened to by the great sages and seers when they were in their intuitive meditation. Later days, whatever revelations they got, they expressed in words and remembered it and expressed it in words, and that came to be known as Smriti literature. Smriti means that which is remembered. The Vedas, as we have already seen, are not of human origin because they are revelations. But the Smritis, definitely they are the products of great rishis and scholars of ancient India. Apart from the Smriti, we find spiritual literature in the form of itihasas and puranas. Itihasa means it happened like this. That means it is a narrative of history. Whatever has happened in history, that is itihasas. And Puranas, as I had already explained, they are products of great imagination of the sages and seers, poets and laureates to explain the basic tenets of the Vedas, the Upanishads, and those that are in this Smriti. The itihasas or epics, there are two principal epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ramayana is attributed to sage Valmiki, and Mahabharata is authored by Veda Vyasa, the one who compiled all the Vedas. In later days, he, for the benefit of the posterity, humanity, he expounded the basic tenets of the Vedas in the Mahabharata. The Puranas are also attributed to Veda Vyasa and many other rishis. Essentially, there are 18 Puranas and Mahabharata has a very important part of it, that is Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna's message to Arjuna who was in the battlefield. That Gita is also considered to be an Upanishad. While narrating the Gita, scholars say Gita-Upanishad. And the essence of philosophy, Upanishadic philosophy, the entire Upanishadic philosophy, Sarvopanishado Gavo Dhogda Gopala Nandana Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Gitam Gita-Amritam Dugdam Gita-Amritam Mahad. The message of all the Upanishads, they are contained in the Bhagavad Gita, and therefore it is considered as an Upanishad, the essence of all the Upanishads. There is yet another scripture, section of scripture which is known as Tantra. Tanum trayate iti tantraha. That which protects our body, mind, intellect. That message, wisdom, is Tantra. Tantra is basically the tenets for performing of spiritual acts, pujas and other devotion, meditation, etc. So, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas and the Itihasas and the Tantra Shastra, these are the basic scriptures which expound and expose the tenets, basic tenets of Hindu thought and culture. The epics and Puranas have got a very important role to play in the Indian culture and life. It has made a profound influence on Indian thought and culture because in the later days, poets, dramatists, and politicians, painters, sculptors, all of them have been influenced by the epics, especially Ramayana, Mahabharata, and it has permeated the entire consciousness of the Indian national life. Swami Vivekananda, he very emphatically declares that understanding India is possible only when you understand Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ignorance of Ramayana and Mahabharata is ignorance of Indian thought and culture. You cannot know anything about India unless you have a thorough understanding of the scriptures. That's what Swami Vivekananda says. He says, in fact, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are the two encyclopedias of ancient Aryan life and wisdom, portraying an ideal civilization which humanity has yet to aspire after. It presents before humanity a very great ideal, how a civilization is to be built up. And Swami Vivekananda says that it has yet to come into perfection. It is still in the making, but the values are already given in the Ramayana and Mahabharata. A Western author, MacDonald, he says, probably no work of world literature, secular in its origin, has ever produced so profound an influence on the life and thought of a people as the Ramayana. He says, Ramayana, it has tremendous influence on the life of people in Bharatavarsha since times immemorial. The Ramayana, about the origin of the Ramayana, there is a story that the author Valmiki, he was in his early life a dacoit called Ratnakara. He used to loot and plunder merchants and people passing through forests. One day it so happened that sage Narada was passing through the forest and Ratnakara tried to rob Narada, but Narada had nothing except his veena and his tambura in his hand, and Narada boldly confronted Ratnakara, and he asked him a question. You see, I have got only this small instrument. I am prepared to give it to you, but I want to know why you are doing it. Then Ratnakara said that I have got my wife and children, I have to protect the family, and this is the only profession I know, this is the only way I can earn. But then Narada said, by plundering people, by killing people, you are committing great sin, and you will have to suffer for that sin. And you say that you are doing it for the sake of your family. Will your family also share the sin that is accruing to you? Then Ratnakara thought for a minute and said, definitely they must, because when they are sharing all that loot that I take home, they are enjoying it, then they must enjoy this sin also. Then Narada said, my dear friend, I will remain here, I will not move anywhere. You just go to your home, ask your wife and children whether they agree with your viewpoint. When they agree, if they agree, you please come back, I will surrender everything to you, I will surrender myself to you, I will not move. Ratnagara believed the sage and he went home and he asked his wife and children, but they said, why should we share your sin? It is your job to feed us, but in what way you are feeding us, that is none of our concern. It was an eye-opener for Ratnagara. He came back to Narada. Narada initiated him into renunciation, and according to the advice of Narada, Ratnagara sat on tapacharya under a tree for years together. It is said that an anthill formed around his body and he never moved from there. Because of that anthill, he came to be known as Valmiki. Valmika is anthill. Valmiki he became. And he used to live in that forest area. Every day he used to go to the river Sarayu to perform his sandhya and puja and all oblations, etc. It so happened that one day when Valmiki was going to the Sarayu river, on the bank there was a big tree, and on the tree two birds were perched, lovebirds were perched there. They were playing the game of love, and Valmiki was watching it. Suddenly he saw an arrow striking the male bird, killing it and pushing it down. And the sage, he burst into severe anger and he turned and he found a hunter who had sped that arrow. And in that angry mood, Valmiki uttered a curse. Manishada pradishtam tumagama shashwati samaha yat krauncha mitina degamavati kama mohita. These lovebirds, they were playing the game of love, calm and quiet on the top of the tree, and you have unnecessarily killed them. You have caused suffering to those birds. And the same suffering throughout your life you will also suffer. And he cursed that hunter. But afterwards, Valmiki started thinking, after all, it is the profession of the hunter to hunt the birds. And why should I curse him? Is it justifiable that I cursed him? And it says at that time Brahma appeared, advised Valmiki to write the story of Lord Rama, who was ruling at that time Ayodhya, the king and emperor of land. He was considered to be a dharmatma, a noble, pious king and emperor. You write the story of Rama. And Valmiki agreed and he wrote that Adikavya, Ramayana. It came out of Valmiki. And Brahma assured him, Yavat Tasyan Digraha Mahitale, as long as mountains and rivers exist on this planet Earth, Ramayana Lokeshu Prajarishyati. It will spread all over the country and among the people, and it will inspire the life of generations and generations of people belonging to this holy land of Bharatavarsha. Now, there are opinions of scholars about the origin of the epics. Some of the scholars, Max Muller and others, they discuss about it. Winternitz says that in the Brahmanas, we found that in the Vedas, there is a mantra, Brahmana, Aranyaka, Upanishad. In the Brahmanas, there are samvada hymns. Samvada hymns means conversation, discussion, etc. And akhyanas, narratives of people, great men, achievers, etc. Those found in the Vedas, They are the source for Ramayana and Mahabharata. That is an opinion of the scholars. In any way, Ramayana and Mahabharata, they represent the basic tenets of our culture and heritage presented by the great sages and seers. Ramayana calls itself a kavya. Kavya means a poetic narrative, and it is a work dealing with dharma. Dharma means values of life, culture, heritage. In the present form, Ramayana consists of 7 kandas, 7 books, and 7 books of 24,000 stanzas. That is how we today find Ramayana in 7 kandas. The Balakanda, the Ayodhya Kanda, the Aranya Kanda, the Yuddha Kanda, the Sundara Kanda, and we have also got the Uttara Rama Charita. It is also considered as a part of Ramayana, though some scholars say that Uttara Kanda is a later imposition. It is also a part of Ramayana. And Ramayana undoubtedly is the first poetical work of human origin. In the history of world literature, there is no other poetic work which has been produced prior to Ramayana. Even in Greek literature, the Iliad and Odyssey, they are considered to be the most ancient literature in the West, Greek culture. They are also, according to scholars, based on our ancient epics. The story of abduction of Sita, that is presented in the story of the Helen of Troy, the war for Helen of Troy, and the Mahabharata is presented in Odyssey. That's what the scholars say. And Valmiki is undoubtedly the first Indian poet. Earlier to Valmiki, in the history of India, there is no mention of any other poet. He is the first and foremost poet. And these 4 kandas, they present the entire culture and heritage of Bharatavarsha as depicted in the Ramayana. We will now have a glance what exactly is the culture and heritage depicted in Ramayana. We find in the early part of Ramayana the empire of Dasharatha. A very beautiful, vivid description is given there. It speaks of the many-sided picture of a perfect life based principally on the spiritual life of the people. And in Dasharatha's kingdom, we find the prosperity of the kingdom, the plenty of supply of wealth. There is no atheistic people there. We find description of water supply to the people in Ayodhya and agriculture and trade prospering. All these are presented in the Ramayana. Ramayana presents the picture of a prosperous, perfect, well-maintained country. Even when Rama is in exile, when Bharata comes to see him, In the conversation between Rama and Bharata, we find Rama asking Bharata questions about water supply in Ayodhya, the payment of salary, etc., for the soldiers, and the payment to all teachers, preceptors of education. All these questions are put by Rama to Bharata, whether these are all maintained properly under your guidance. So the king always looked upon the prosperity, plenty, and the progress of the people of the country. Not only the economic prosperity, Ramayana also presents the significance of the military equipment and efficiency. A Rashtra must have a very strong military and efficiency to control external aggressions. The rules of chivalry are beautifully expounded. Welfare of the soldiers is stressed. And not only that, apart from this military efficiency and control of the nation, the people have also a role to play in the development of the nation. We find Dasharatha, before declaring Rama as his successor, he convenes a gathering of the people, all noble people in his Ayodhya, calls them teachers, scholars, tradesmen, agriculturists, common people. He calls all of them and he consults them. I have decided to make Rama as my successor. What is your opinion? So, without the consent of the people, even the king is not appointed. The king, he considers himself to be a proper representative of the people, approved and accepted by the people. So, this picture we find in Ramayana. That means the people, the common people, they have also got a very important place in the administration of the state, the administration of the country. It's very beautifully presented in Ramayana. And wherever the king fails in his duty, the nation will suffer. This is very beautifully presented in the Ramayana. In the Lanka story, Yuddhakanda, we find Vibhishana criticizing Ravana. He says, as a king, you have to keep up the morality, you have to keep up the values of the kingdom. You have failed in that. By abducting Sita, you have brought ruin to this country, Lanka. Vibhishana very severely admonishes Ravana, and he even gives up his relationship with Ravana and goes to Rama to support Rama. On the other hand, Kumbhakarna, he is also severely critical of the action of Ravana, and he says, as a king and emperor, you have failed in your duty. You have abducted somebody's wife, you have brought ruin for this Lanka, because now the aggression is going to take place. Rama is not going to sit quiet, he is going to attack us, and because of you, the country is going to suffer. But then he says, all these years, 6 months I will sleep, 6 months I will be awake, you have been feeding me, and just to show my gratitude to the king and emperor, the people, whatever be the action of the king and emperor, they cannot betray him, they have to stand by him, they have to be loyal. So Kumbhakarna says, because the food that you had given me, I show my loyalty, I will stand by you and I will fight on your side. I will fight for you in the battlefield. Of course, I will be killed. I am prepared to be killed by Rama because that is going to be a great moksha for me. This beautiful presentation of the values, the people's values, the king's values, These are all very beautifully presented in Ramayana. And the scope and importance of education, that is also very beautifully presented in the Ramayana. The king questions whether the Brahmanas who are teaching, education is in the hands of the Brahmanas, they are well taken care of and they are happy and content. In one scene we find a Trijada, an aged Brahmin comes to the court of Rama, and Rama says, whatever you want, I will give you because you are in the profession of teaching. And Trijada says, I will give my axe to you, battle axe to you. You just throw it, and whatever area is covered, give it to me as a dana. So Rama takes that stick, he flings it across the river Saryu, and it is said that the entire cattle, cow wealth, and in those days cow was the wealth of the nation, all those are gifted to Trijada. So that means teachers, Brahmins, especially scholars, they were profusely benefited, they were profusely given gifts, etc. It is very beautifully presented. And the kings also performed Vishwajit yagas. We find the yaga of Vishwajit. They had to protect the nation. Last time I told that among the kings and emperors, those who think that they can be the heads, the one who thinks that he can be the head of the entire nation, he conducts an Ashwamedha yaga and brings all under those kingdoms that are covered by that horse, they are all brought under the empire. Those kings who think that they are more capable than the one who has sent the horse, they will have to confront him in the battle, and once they get defeated, they surrender everything to the king and emperor, and they become part and parcel of the nation. So these are the duties of the kings, and protection of the people in the forest. That was also a very great task taken up by the kings and emperors. In one case, there is a scene where Rama wants to gift Lava and Kusha with riches, and Lava and Kusha says, we are forest dwellers, we don't need your riches, we are happy and content with whatever this forest gives. So, well maintenance of the forest, hermitages, and the people living in the forest, these are all very beautifully presented in the Ramayana. Then, above all, the ideal of dharma. Dharma in all walks and life, in all aspects of life, it was upheld, holy, blissful, heroic, and loving true life, it was insisted. Group dharma and individual dharma. A society, a kula, has got kula dharma. A jana, a grama, they have got the grama dharma, jana dharma. And similarly, the individual, Vyakti dharma, all these aspects of dharma are expounded. Performance of rites and rituals, that was enjoined. But even the performance of rites and rituals, they should be only for the welfare of the family, for the welfare of the society, for the welfare of the nation. If any such rite and ritual is performed for selfish purpose, it brings destruction and devastation to the society and to the nation. Ravana, Meghanada, Kumbhakarna, they performed great sacrifices. Ravana acquired great merits by performance of those sacrifices. But what happened? Even Meghanada had acquired powers by performing sacrifices. He became Indrajit. But all the merits accrued through the sacrifices and performance of penance, etc., they were all misused, and that brought ruin to the nation. On the other hand, we find Vibhishana of the Lanka nation. He stands for truth. He stands for values. He could not agree to Ravana's action of abducting Sita and keeping her as a prisoner in the Ashoka Vana. And therefore, he left the company of Ravana and came to Rama, surrendered himself to Rama. And because of his righteous way of life, he was rewarded. He became the successor, the king and emperor of Lanka after the demise of Ravana. We find the characters in Ramayana, each one beautifully presenting higher values of life. Hanuman is one of the most prominent characters in Ramayana. Valmiki has given beautiful description of Hanuman in the Ramayana. He is an embodiment of Dharma. Hanuman, the son of Vayuputra, Manojavam Maruta Tulyavegam Jitendriyam Buddhimatam Varishtam Vadhatmajam Vanara Yuthamukyam Sriramadutam Charanam Pravadye. Manojavam, one who has conquered his mind and senses, a perfect brahmachari. Hanuman was a perfect brahmachari. Maruta Tulyavegam, and his force fuels like a wind. Jitendriyam, one who has conquered all his senses. Buddhimatam varishtam. When Hanuman presents himself for the first time before Rama in the Aranyakanta, Rama and Lakshmana, they see this monkey standing before them, and Lakshmana is wondering, what creature is this, where from it came, who is he? At that time, Rama tells Lakshmana, you are seeing a very great genius, a Dharmatma before you. At the very first sight of Hanuman, Rama recognized the divinity in the latter, in Hanuman, and he tells Lakshmana, he is a scholar, he is a well-learned person. A beautiful description of Hanuman is given by Rama, even without asking Hanuman about him or knowing more about him. And Hanuman also, according to scriptures, legends, Hanuman is the embodiment of Lord Rudra, Shiva himself. And therefore there is no wonder that he was a great sadhaka. He surrendered totally to Lord Ramachandra in the service of Lord Ramachandra. And at every stage, he demonstrated his strength by just uttering the name of Ramnam. When he had to cross the ocean and reach Lanka, he came to the seashore, just uttered Jai Sri Ram, and he was in the air. So he had immense faith and devotion. He knew that Rama is not an ordinary human being. He is Lord Narayana himself, who has taken the avatara to establish dharma in the earth. And therefore, he adored and worshipped Rama, and taking to his name, he was able to do many things, achieve many things. And when he reached Ayodhya, Lanka, he went in search of Mother Sita. First he went to the palace of Ravana. There in the palace, in a beautiful room, on a coach, he found a very beautiful lady. You know, Mandodari. Mandodari is supposed to be one of the Patipratas. Sita, Madhura, Maya, Mandodari, these are all, or one among the Panchakanyas. Mandodari is considered to be a very great, chaste woman. And seeing this chaste, beautiful woman, for a minute, Hanuman was wondering whether this could be Sita. But then he thought, no. Sita will never have a comfortable stay in the palace of Ravana. Therefore, it cannot be Sita. And he left the place and he went to the Ashokavana. And there he presents himself before Sita. Before he presents himself before Sita, he finds Ravana and his retinue coming there, trying to persuade Sita to accept Ravana, but Sita refuses. Hanuman was wondering how he should introduce himself, because if he goes in his form, perhaps she may think that he is a spy of Ravana. She may not accept. So he took to the form of a small monkey, climbed to the top of a tree, sat there and started chanting Ramanam. He knew that Sita was all the time chanting Ramanam, a devout wife of Lord Ramachandra. And when he started chanting the Ramanam with his beautiful voice, Sita recognized. He comes down and presents himself before her as Ramaduta, assures her of all protection and help. He says Rama will come, he will conquer Lanka and save you from the clutches of Ravana. Before leaving Lanka, he wanted to see, because he is a very intelligent ambassador also. He was an ambassador of Lord Rama. As a messenger of Rama he had come. He wanted to see the might and strength of Lanka, the army, the military equipment, and the prosperity, everything he wanted to have, because he will have to report to Lord Ramachandra. Before Lord Ramachandra attacks Lanka, he must have a clear picture of Lanka, and therefore he goes round that island, Lanka island. And he also wanted to warn Ravana. In Ashokavana, when he met Sita, he told her, of course, Rama will come and conquer Lanka, but before that, if you are willing, I'll take you on my shoulders. He showed his Vishwarupa. He says, I can take you on my shoulders and cross the ocean and take you back to Lord Ramachandra. But Sita, as a chaste wife, she refuses. She says, no, I don't want. I want my husband to come here and rescue me. After destroying Ravana, he must rescue me from the clutches of this Rakshasa. And therefore, Hanuman, before leaving Lanka, he wanted to warn Ravana about the might of the enemy that he is going to confront. How to go to the presence of Ravana? He played a trick. He started destroying the forest, destroying the trees, etc., and creating havoc. And the Rakshasas, they were terribly afraid. They reported to Ravana, and he sends Indrajit to capture this monkey. Of course, Hanuman, with one strike, he could have felled all these enemy Rakshasas, but his purpose was to present himself before Ravana, and therefore he feigned defeat and he got himself bound and dragged. He was dragged to the court of Ravana. We find a beautiful scene there. Ravana is sitting on his high pedestal on his throne, and the monkey was there. And he questions monkey. The monkey says, I am an ambassador. I am an ambassador of Lord Rama. You must honor an ambassador. When an ambassador of another country comes to your country, it is your duty to honor him. You must honor me. You must give me a seat. And if you are not going to give me a seat, I know how to make my seat. And with his tail, he made a very big asana and sat on that. And then he tells Ravana, you see, it is not difficult for me if I can destroy the whole of Lanka. It's not difficult for me to defeat you and take Sita back. But Rama, as an ideal king and emperor, he will conquer Lanka, defeat you, and he will take Sita back to the mainland. I just have come here to warn you. It is said that Ravana ordered his soldiers to tie clothes on his tail, on the monkey's tail, and set it fire. And it was done. The monkey was not affected. He is Pavanaputra, Vayusuta. How can fire affect him? Nothing can harm him. But anyway, he wanted to teach a lesson to the Rakshasas, and he set the entire of Lanka to fire with the fire on his tail. But he saw that Ashokavana is not affected because Sita Devi is there, and therefore he presents himself before Sita Devi and then assures her that he will come back with Rama and comes back to the mainland. As a true ambassador, Hanuman, he makes his report to Lord Rama. Kande in Sitaye, Kamban beautifully presents, I saw Sita, and he describes her condition, everything about Sita, etc. in the Ramayana. And later, when Vibhishana comes to Rama for surrender, Hanuman, he makes it very clear to Rama the character and the genius of Vibhishana, the honesty and sincerity of Vibhishana, everything is apprised to Lord Rama by Hanuman. And in the war also, Hanuman plays a very important role. We find in the Ramayana, in the battle, at one stage, Lakshmana is severely wounded and he needs treatment, and Hanuman goes to the Sanjeevi mountain and brings the Sanjeevi to save Lakshmana. All these we find in the Yuddhakanda. After the war, when Rama returns with Sita to the mainland and proceeds to Ayodhya, Hanuman also joins them in Ayodhya. The Rama Pattabhisheka takes place. Rama wants to honor all those who had helped him in the war and who were with him during the period of crisis. He gives presents to all. And Hanuman was standing there. He didn't take any present or anything. Sita looks at him and she feels, why when all are honored, Hanuman is not given anything. And therefore, she takes her pearl necklace from her neck and she offers it to Hanuman. Hanuman, as a true monkey, he receives it and he starts biting that beads. And Rama was wondering what this monkey is doing. And he says, what is the use of this necklace for me? I want Rama and Sita to be in my heart. He opens his heart and says, when you are here inside my heart, what is the use of wearing this necklace? I don't need it. So that is the true devotion and surrender of Hanuman, beautifully presented in the Ramayana. He stands, even in the Uttarakanda we find, when Rama is conducting the Ashwamedha Yaga, when the horse sent by Rama enters into the precincts of Valmiki, the forest dwelling of Valmiki, Lava and Kusha, they are true warriors. They are the descendants of the great Raghu, Raghava, and as true warriors, they prevent the horse, and therefore Rama's army has to confront Lava and Kusha. Hanuman appears there. Hanuman knows that Lava and Kusha are the progeny of Ramachandra, and therefore he stands on their side. He tells Rama, though I am devoted to you, I am your loyal servant, these are the future successors to the throne of Ayodhya, these are your children, and therefore it is my bounden duty to protect them also. So there he uses his wisdom, righteousness, and stands by Lava and Kusha. Ultimately, Rama hands over everything to Lava and Kusha. That is the story. So here we find the presentation of beautiful character sketch of Hanuman in the Ramayana. Through other characters also, Ramayana presents high values. We have the characters Vali and Sugriva. Vali was the ruler of Kishkinda, elder brother of Sugriva. He was very mighty and powerful. It is said that once Ravana had to confront Vali, and Vali bound Ravana by his tail and flung him across the sea. That was the strength of Vali. When Hanuman meets Rama and tells him about Kishkinda, about the story of Sugriva, about Sugriva's wife Ruma abducted by Vali. It is said that younger brother Sugriva was at one time very loyal to his elder brother Vali, and once when Vali entered into a fierce battle with the Rakshasa in a mountain cave, Sugriva stood outside as a guard to protect his king and emperor Vali, but he found blood oozing out of that cave and mistook that it must have been that of Vali. Probably Vali is killed. By that mistaken understanding, Sugriva returns to the capital of Kishkinda. He informs the ministers and others, and they install Sugriva in the place of Vali to take care of the country. But after killing that Rakshasa, when Vali comes out and he finds that Sugriva is seated on the throne, he is very fierce. He thinks that Sugriva has betrayed him. He has usurped the kingdom in his absence. And in that angry mood, he drives Sugriva, and Sugriva had to leave Kishkinda and run to a mountain abode, the abode of a sage, where he got protection. In this story, we find that when Hanuman tells Ramachandra about Sugriva, how he abducted the wife of how Vali had abducted the wife of Sugriva, Roma, and taken her away. Rama is pained because he himself had suffered the separation from his wife because of the abduction of Ravana, and therefore he wanted to teach lesson to Vali. But Vali, because of his prophecy, he had a boon that whoever stands before him, they will lose half of their strength. That was a boon that he had got. And Rama knew about that. He came to know about it from Sugriva and Hanuman. And therefore, Rama, in a battle, he could not directly confront Vali. So he asks Sugriva to engage Vali in a fight. And Rama stands behind a tree, and then he spends his arrow and hits Vali. He hits Vali. This is the story that we find in the Ramayana. At that time, Vali questions righteously, you have done adharma. In a war, you cannot hide and strike. You must come, and as a true warrior, you should have come before me and fought against me. At that time, beautiful discussion takes place about dharma. What is Yuddha Dharma? How to confront an enemy? And first, Rama tells Vali, why I confronted you. Though I had no personal quarrel with you, no enmity with you, you had done a great harm to Sugriva by abducting his wife, Roma, and taking her prisoner and driving him away. And I have a right to restore the power to Sugriva. The reason he says, Ishwagunamiyam bhumi sasaila vanakananaha. The entire land from Himalayas up to the ocean, up to Lanka, the entire land, it belongs to the Ishwakus. It is the Samrajya of Dasharatha, the Samrajya of the Raghu dynasty. And therefore, in Chitrakuda, I had given a promise to Bharata that when I am in the forest, as a representative of Bharata, I will maintain the law and order in the country. I will help him in maintaining the law and order of the Ishwagu Samrajya. And therefore, this Kishkinda is part and parcel of the Ishwagu Samrajya. And here, when an unrighteous act is taking place, as a representative of Bharata, as a representative of the Ishwagu Samrajya, it is my duty to protect the people, to protect Dharma, and therefore I have to fight you. And in Yuddha Dharma, intelligence, better part of valor is genius, ingenuity. And I know that you had got this boon from a rishi, and therefore I cannot stand before you and fight, and therefore I had to take to this. This is Yuddha Dharma. So he explains everything to Vali, and before the demise of Vali, he gives him a promise. Of course, you are elder brother and senior, and therefore, according to the law of succession, I will make your son Angada. After Sugriva, I will make your son Angada as the ruler of Kishkinda. Your son will get his righteous position. He gives that assurance to Vali. So we find all these in Ramayana, the character of Vali and Sugriva. They also present the values of life that were upheld by the people, by the country, by the nation at that time. And another important aspect of Ramayana, which is highlighted by scholars, is the sanctity and possibilities of married life. A Grihastha Dharma, how a Grihastha has to perform himself in his day-to-day life, very beautifully Ramayana presents a great lesson for all the Grihasthas. Dasharatha, while giving Sita in marriage to Rama, at the time he tells Rama, Iyam Sita Mama Sudha Tava Dharma Patni. She will be a partner, as a wife, she will be a partner in your life. Saha Dharmini. In all your righteous actions, she will stand by you, she will be loyal to you. And the sanctity of the married life, he explains to Rama. We all know that Rama was Ekapatini Vrada. Though in those days Dasharatha had 4 wives, 3 wives, but Rama, he was Ekapatini Vrada. Only Sita he accepted as his wife. And Sita also was totally surrendered and dedicated to Rama. When Hanuman as I already pointed out, Hanuman tells her that I can take you across the sea. She refuses. Let Rama come, and she had full confidence that Rama will conquer Ravana and take her back to the mainland Ayodhya. Very beautifully, the character sketch of Sita is presented. Even at the time of the battle, Sita wants to protect the Rakshasas. Of course, they had no quarrel with her. It was all the inducement of Ravana. He had put them all for her protector. But then Sita wants Rama to spare the life of those Rakshasas in the Ashokavana. After all, women, they should not be annihilated. So all these noble qualities are very beautifully presented by Valmiki through the character of Sita. In Hindu way of life, at every marriage ceremony in the Hindu society, the women, the girls, the brides are reminded that they must emulate the example of Sita Devi in their day-to-day life. So Sita is considered to be the embodiment of chastity, the ideal of womanhood. All these are presented in Ramayana. Rama, he is the supreme being, the character of Rama, he is the supreme being. In the Balakanda, we find Rama going with Vishwamitra to the forest for his training and education. Though he is himself the avatara, and Vishwamitra also knew that he is the avatara of Lord Narayana, when he had taken to that human form, he has to perform acts of dharma as enshrined in the scriptures to make the human life perfect. We find in the forest, when the sun is rising in the early morning, Vishwamitra, knowing fully well who Rama is, he says, Kausalya supraja Rama purva sandhya pravartate uttishta narashardhula kartavyam devamannikam. He knows Rama is avatara, but here he addresses him Kausalya Supraja, son of Kausalya. Here he is only son of Kausalya. Kausalya Supraja Rama Purva Sandhya Pravartate. According to Hindu custom, every day morning when the sun rises, we have to make oblations to the sun god. Surya Namaskara, it is part and parcel of Hindu way of life. So Purva Sandhya Pravartate, in the east the sun is rising up. Uttishta Narashardula, get up. In the morning hour, he wakes up Rama. Kartavyam Devamannikam. Though he himself is avatara of Narayana, when he had taken to this human form, he has to present to the other humanity the example of a perfect life. And Kartavyam Devamannikam, you have to perform this daily oblation, Devamannikam. And in the forest, we find beautiful character sketch of Rama presented by Valmiki. When the Rakshasi Tataka comes, he hesitates because she is a woman. How can I kill her? But then Vishwamitra teaches him, after all, a Rakshasi is a Rakshasi. Here you cannot consider her as a woman and other things. And therefore, he is persuaded by Vishwamitra. He is taught the Dharma Shastra, what exactly as a king, as a prince, he has to do it. And he performs the activities suggested to him by Rishi Vishwamitra as a perfect student. He is after all a student of Vishwamitra, and as a perfect disciple, he performs all those acts. In the Ramayana, we find Lakshmana, the ideal brother of Rama. When Rama takes to the forest life, Lakshmana also accompanies him to the forest. And in the forest, every step, Lakshmana stands guard to Rama and Sita. When the golden deer, Maricha, appears, entices Sita, and Sita asks Rama to capture that golden deer for her, and Rama goes behind the deer. Lakshmana is entrusted with the responsibility of protecting Sita. But when Sita hears the sound of Rama produced by Maricha to entice her, to cheat her, she mistakes that something has happened to Rama, and she asks Lakshmana to go to the direction in which Rama had gone. And at that time, Lakshmana very intelligently, he draws a line. He knew that something bad is going to happen, and therefore he draws a line, and he asks Sita not to cross the line. This Lakshmana Rekha, don't cross, but I will go and try to find out. And he goes there, and he finds that it was all the cheating game of Maricha. And when they come back, Rama and Lakshmana come back to the abode, they find that Sita is missing. Rama is very agitated. In Ramayana, Swami Chinmayananda, while discussing Ramayana, he says that we have got essentially three Ramayana descriptions. One is Valmiki Ramayana, another one is Kamba Ramayana, and the third one is the Ramayana written by Goswami Tulasidas. In Valmiki Ramayana, Chinmayananda says that the goal of Valmiki was to present Rama as an ideal man. So he was full of human virtues as well as human frailties. Kutti Krishna Marar, a Malayalam writer who was editor of Madhrubhumi, he has written about Valmiki Yuda Raman, the Rama of Valmiki. Swami Chinmayananda says that Valmiki put some black dots on the face of Rama also, because he wanted to present him as an ordinary human being, not as the divine, and therefore there were some black spots. When Sita is missing, Rama is fierce with anger, and he abuses Lakshmana like anything. He says, "Why did you leave Sita? You wanted her to be abducted, to be harmed. That's why you left her. You are not loyal to me." He abuses Lakshmana like anything. There, Rama behaves like an ordinary human being. So, Chinmayananda points out that these are all black dots on the face of Rama. In many places, Rama behaves like an ordinary human being. But, he says, Kamban in his Ramayana, he wanted to present Rama more as an embodiment of ideals or ideals. And therefore, he had removed those black dots from the face of Rama and tried to present him as an embodiment of ideals. We had already seen that in the Ramayana, when Ravana stands before Rama, the sun is setting, Sandhya Kala, and the war has to come to an end. Ravana happened to stand before Rama unarmed. He had lost his arms, and Rama could have struck Ravana in one trice. In a trice he could have struck him, but Rama addresses Ravana and tells him, "Indrubo in Alaiva, I am not going to kill you now because the sun is setting. The war has to come to an end today. We will continue this fight tomorrow. You go and come." And he sends back Ravana. So Rama behaves like an ideal enemy also in all aspects. Ideal father, ideal son, ideal husband, ideal brother, ideal king, even an ideal enemy. In all aspects, Rama is an embodiment of ideals. And This is the presentation of Kamban according to Swami Chinmayananda. And he says, Ramacharita Manasa, there Goswami Tulasidas' intention was to present before the people Rama as an embodiment of divinity, an avatara of the Lord, and therefore the whole stress was on describing the divinity of Lord Ramachandra. And Goswami Tulasidas' Ramacharita Manasa is more than a historical narrative or an epic poem. It is a devotional song, and that was the role played by Goswami Tulasidas in presenting the Ramayana. On the whole, this Ramayana has inspired generations of people, not only in our country, but even abroad. We all know that Indonesia is a Muslim nation, but the ancient people of Indonesia, they were all descendants of people of Bharatavarsha, and we find great temples, Prambanan temple in Indonesia. 2 days back, in the newspapers and in the media, we found that recently, very recently, they have discovered a Ganesha temple, 7,500-year-old Ganesha temple in Indonesia, and they are very proud of it. Archaeological survey and great excavations are taking place. Right now, the excavations are taking place in Indonesia to bring out that ancient 7,500-year-old Ganesha temple. So they have been influenced by our Indian culture and heritage since times immemorial. Sukarno, who was the president of Indonesia, he wanted to visit India, and at that time Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister, and he flew to India. Biju Patnaik, I think he was at that time a pilot, along with Rajiv Gandhi had undergone the training in aircraft driving, and Biju Patnaik was the pilot who brought Sukarno to India. And Sukarno's wife was pregnant at that time. When the plane was landing in Ayodhya, in Delhi airport, there was cloud around. It was a cloudy day, and Sukarno asked Biju, what is the word for this cloud in Sanskrit? He said, Megha. Then Sukarno said, it is a very beautiful word, Megha. And the child that was born to Sukarno at that particular time, he named her as Meghaputri, Sukarno Meghaputri. In later days, she became the president of Indonesia. The Indonesian Airlines is known as Garuda Airlines, named after the vehicle of Lord Narayana. And the capital of Indonesia, Di Jakarta, Ayodhya, it is named as Ayodhya. The Indonesian currency, they depict Ganesha, and other Indian scriptures are depicted in Indonesia everywhere. So it has influenced the life of people, even though Indonesia declared itself as a Muslim nation. Somebody asked in the Pan-Islamic conference, Sukarno was asked, after all, you are a Muslim, how do you glorify this Ramayana and Ayodhya and Garuda and all these things? Then Sukarno very coolly replied, in the Pan-Islamic conference, he replied, of course, we have all become Muslims, we are all worshippers of Allah, but we have not given up our culture and heritage which we have inherited from our forefathers of Bharatavarsha, and therefore we glorify them. So this Ramayana has influenced not only the people of India, but even people of outside the country. Some American scholars, they came here, they came to India, they marched from Delhi up to Rameswaram to cover the spots where Rama had stayed during his Vanavasa Yatra, and very beautiful work they have written about the path of Lord Rama in India when he marched for the Vanavasa. So these are all great influences that Ramayana and Mahabharata has exerted on scholars all over the world, people all over the world. As I already told, that Odyssey and Iliad are also inspired by Ramayana and Mahabharata. So the epics of Bharatavarsha, they play a very great role not only in the life of the people of Bharatavarsha, but also on the entire humanity. The values upheld by the scriptures are accepted by people all over the world, by scholars all over the world. The International Ramayana Festival is celebrated in Indonesia every year. And in Moscow, they got the Ramayana ballad, a Russian communist country, Moscow, Russia. They celebrate every year the Ramayana ballad dances. The entire Ramayana is presented in ballads. So it has influenced not only the life of the people of India, but also the people all over the world. In the next lecture, we will look into the Mahabharata, the important characteristics of the Mahabharata epic, how it has influenced the people of Bharatavarsha as well as people abroad. Jai Shri Ram, Vande Mataram.